Board of Education, and we'll start by calling the roll call. Ms. Calvez.
Here.
Ms. Carasola.
Here.
Mr. Hayward.
Here.
Ms. Parlamas.
Here.
Ms. Rundell.
Here.
Dr. Robinson.
Here.
In accordance with Public Law in 1975, Chapter 231, notice of tonight's meeting was mailed to the Record, the Ridgewood News, on January 9th, 2024. Notice of this meeting was also mailed to the Borough Clerk. The Borough Clerk was posted on the bulletin board of the Board of Education office in the Administration Building on the same date. Copies of the procedures in effect for regular board meetings are available to the public at tonight's meeting. Our mission statement, the Glen Rock School District, founded on principles of education in partnership with the supportive community, provides an exceptional education to all students to cultivate resilient, responsible, and engaged global citizens. Welcome to tonight's organization meeting. We will start by reading into the record the results of the November 5th, 2024 Board of Education election. Ms. Karen Stevenson, 3,737 votes. Mr. Boaz Cohen, 3,549 votes. Mr. Daniel Corey, 1,833 votes. Ms. Sivan Ramanaskino, 1,669. Mr. Gregory Fuller, 1,414 votes. And Mr. Alan J. Storinge Jr., 1,262 votes. We will now proceed with the oath of office for our newly elected members. Please join me over at the podium, and we will go through the oath of office.
You should do it facing the camera.
Okay, raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and to the governments established in the United States and this state under the authority of the people. I do solemnly swear that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law for the office of member of a Board of Education, and that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all duties of that office according to the best of my ability. Congratulations. Join the board on the dais.
Sure, it's fine when you did it. I see how it is. Welcome back. Where you been?
Ms. Stevenson, Mr. Cohen, and Mr. Corey will now be added to the roll as present for this evening's meeting. At this point, we are now going to seek nominations for the office of President of the Board of Education. Do we have a motion? Ms. Rundell.
I would like to nominate Dr. Damali Robinson for president.
Do we have any other nominations? Okay, hearing none, we will proceed to a vote. Ms. Calvez, sorry.
Yes.
Ms. Carasola,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mr. Corey,
Yes.
Mr. Hayward,
Yes.
Ms. Parlamas,
Yes.
Dr. Robinson,
Yes.
Ms. Rundell,
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Dr. Robinson wins the election to president. Dr. Robinson is now has been duly elected the president of the Glen Rock Board of Education and will officiate for the remainder of the meeting, which picks up at vice president.
Thank you very much, Mr. Canales, for getting us started today, and Happy New Year, everyone. May I have a nomination for Vice President? Mr. Corey?
I'd like to nominate Ms. Elizabeth Calvez.
Okay. All right. Do we have any other nominations? All right. May we call roll?
Ms. Calvez,
Yes.
Ms. Carasola,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mr. Corey,
Yes.
Mr. Hayward,
Yes.
Ms. Parlamas,
Yes.
Dr. Robinson,
Yes.
Ms. Rendell,
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson,
Yes.
Ms. Calvez is elected vice president.
All right. Thank you for entrusting me with this very important role for this next year. I'm looking forward to serving the board and serving the community in as best manner as possible. And I look forward to having Ms. Calvez by my side, as well as all of the other trustees that we have here, to really move forward and keep our district on track. And I really appreciate everybody working together towards this matter. All right, can I have a motion to discuss R5 through R37? Ms. Parlamas, seconded by Ms. Stevenson. Are there any questions or comments on R5 through R37?
I'm just going to abstain on R36 because I wasn't here when the deals were, like the contracts were made.
Okay, noted. Thank you. All right, seeing no other, Ms. Stevenson.
Can maybe just explain the purpose of doing all this, like just, appointing all the important things that have to be done in order for us to continue as a school? If you can just give an explanation on it so people understand what all this is about.
Sure, I guess the reorg for June, so traditionally, the reorg meeting is in January, and please correct me, Mr. Canales, if I make any missteps. So we have our January reorg meeting, and then historically, we also used to carry on certain business in June. In addition, with Mr. Canales as our VA, we really wanted to get everything just kind of on January, like a board calendar. So this is the current board, so the board is just currently affirming the contracts that we have. There's no changes in any particular contract or anything. It's just saying that this board affirms our current contracts. Am I correct? Okay, thank you.
Dr. Robinson, R19 requires a name.
That's correct. So for R19, thank you. I know what it is already, but I just want to say it properly. Appointment of a New Jersey School Board Association legislative delegate. I know that I've had this conversation with you already, Ms. Stevenson. Would you be willing to do this role again for us? Okay, thank you. So be it resolved, the board appoints, I'm just reading the R19 resolution. Be it resolved, the board appoints Ms. Karen Stevenson as the New Jersey School Board Association legislative delegate for the 2025 calendar year. And Ms. Stevenson has accepted that. So when we do our roll call, we are doing the call associating R19 with Ms. Stevenson.
Can we just have agreement on the mover and seconder for that revision to
Okay.
R19?
All right, can I get a motion to add Ms. Stevenson's name to R19? Ms. Rundell, seconded by Ms. Calvez. All right, we can move to.
Ms. Calvez?
I'm sorry.
Wait.
Oh, sorry.
I just want to let you know, I'm going to abstain from just R9, given my affiliation with Bank of America, since I work there.
Thank you, noted,
What was that, R9?
R9.
R9?
due to conflict. Thank you for that update. All right,
Roll call.
roll call, please.
Ms. Calvez?
Yes.
Ms. Carasola?
Yes, except as noted on R9.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes, except from, as noted, R36.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Hayward?
Yes.
Ms. Parlamas?
Yes.
Dr. Robinson?
Yes.
Ms. Rendell?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. All right, it is 7:12 PM. I would like to proceed to our first set of public comments. These comments will be on agenda items only. Please state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hudson Campbell for Robert Court.
Yes.
Distinguished board members, I'm usually here as a student representative, but today I come to you simply as a concerned member of the Glen Rock High School student body. After this public comment, you're going to hear presentations of the high school program of studies, which will be given an overview of the many opportunities Glen Rock has to offer. However, some of these opportunities are not available to a large group of students because of our district's graduation requirements. Since the New Jersey student learning standards are going to be brought up, I'd like to note that all of Glen Rock's graduation requirements are equivalent to New Jersey's requirements for each subject area, all except for art. Glen Rock High School requires 10 credits in fine and performing arts, whereas the state of New Jersey requires 5. Other schools take notes of these requirements as well. Out of the 40 public, non-magnet, non-charter high schools in the state of New Jersey that are ranked above us by the U.S. News and World Report, all 40 of them only require 5 art credits to graduate. I have here signed a petition by 120 members of the Glen Rock High School student body to amend the Glen Rock Board of Education policy number 5460 to only require 5 art credits to be eligible for graduation. This still allows students to pursue the arts as part of a well-rounded curriculum, while also giving them the opportunity to gain experience in other fields that may interest them as long-term goals and careers. This amendment would not take away art classes from those who want to enroll in them. It would simply give students more freedom in choosing their coursework and give them a chance to orient it in a way that enables them to use what they have learned in Glen Rock beyond high school. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, seeing no other public comments, we'll close public comments number 1 at 7:15 PM. At this time, we will be moving on to our presentations regarding high school public program of studies, followed by a presentation for the board on NJSBA.
Yeah, so we had originally had a few more people coming to present about the program of studies, but we have some illnesses going through because it is winter and that. So we do have Lauren Daniels going to be leading this, and we have a couple of my supervisors here as well to talk about some of the changes. They're not that many, but we do have it, and we do have the presentation. So Dr. Daniel.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. So tonight we're going to talk about some proposed updates to the program of studies. We had mentioned them briefly in the November meeting, so today we're going to talk a little bit further into some of those courses. So the program of studies is really the start of the scheduling process for the next academic year. So following the program of studies, we will start with our course selection sheets and start scheduling all of the students beginning in February from the juniors, sophomores, freshmen, and 8th grade class. So one of the things that will be updated in the program of studies, I just wanted to talk about it briefly tonight, is that currently there is no updated guidance for the Department of Ed graduation requirements as it pertains to standardized testing. So in the program of studies, it still lists up into the class of 2025. We don't have any current guidance, any updates on that, but once it is updated, then we'll have an addendum at a future board meeting. But it stands as it is on the screen with the current graduation requirements are for standardized testing. Okay, I'm just going to skip around because, okay. For the 21st century class, We started a pilot program for this year for our daily announcements. It's listed as an independent study for this year. Students come in the morning and they participate in the broadcast. It's about between 5 and 7 minutes, and they participate in all of the daily announcements that are launched online. It was a big hit. We have 23 students in it, so for next year, the class will be created as daily announcements, and students can register for them. It will still be the 0 period in the morning, but it's no longer a pilot study. We'd like to continue that. And I'm going to give it now to Mr. Morelli, who will talk about art.
Good evening. Thanks for having us. So I'm going to talk about a few different areas, mostly in the social studies and business departments, but to tag in for some of my colleagues, 2 new classes that are coming up, one in art and one in world language. So we're going to offer a new semester elective in the art department known as the Art of Film. And essentially think of it as an art history meets a film course. So if you think about why you decide that you like a movie, when you watch a movie, what makes you like it, this class is going to really get into the ins and outs of what it is about a film that makes it appealing, both from a narrative perspective, so a 3-act arc, to the different cinematography techniques, to lighting design, some of the really famous directors that pioneered film, so Federico Fellini, Alfred Hitchcock, etc., and basically give students the opportunity to have the academic language and the academic discourse and skills to be able to go into a film both throughout history as well as things that are currently in theaters now, and be able to speak to the different elements that make that film up. So we don't really offer anything like this right now. We do offer a documentary film class in the social studies department, which, to be honest, the enrollment has not been as high as we would have liked the last couple of years, but we do have a lot of students that are really interested in art history and a lot of kids that really like movies, so we thought it would be a cool opportunity. Other high schools in the area that do offer this tends to be, or a version of this, it tends to be a really popular elective. So we're going to pilot it this year, and we're going to see what happens. Moving to world language, as some background, we currently offer a 2-course sequence, Spanish Fundamentals 1 and Spanish Fundamentals 2. Originally, the idea behind that was that was supposed to be a 2-course sort of terminal study of high school Spanish. And the idea was if you were a student that language just wasn't really your thing, if you wanted to, if you struggled a little bit more with picking it up, or if you really wanted to focus more on kind of like the cultural aspect of a language rather than the ins and outs of the grammar and sort of the oral proficiency piece, this was a way for you to get your high school graduation requirement done, and to have exposure to the language, but not necessarily continue on past the 2-year sequence. Well, what's happened essentially is that more and more kids have wanted to go past that 2-year sequence, and that the way that the curriculum has currently been written in its iteration, students don't have the same opportunities to be able to go on and be as fully prepared as they could be moving into another level of Spanish beyond this 2-year sequence. So what the plan to do is to replace Spanish Fundamentals 1 next year with a course called Conversational Spanish A. And so ultimately, it will give basic skills and an ability to communicate and focus on everyday sorts of stuff, so not necessarily all the backbones that you would need to move to an AP level at one point, so to say, but really just if you were to try to navigate traveling, for example, if you were to go on vacation to Spain or to Mexico, what are sort of the basics that you would need? And the idea that basically kids would go into this class with is, I'm going to walk away with a command of Spanish that I can get around if I'm in a place that is predominantly Spanish speaking. It also works really well if they haven't yet studied a world language. For whatever reason, coming into high school, or if they were switching from one language to another. So let's say you took Latin in middle school and then you want to switch to Spanish in high school, this is an opportunity to do that. It gives a lot of opportunity for practical application. And then the plan would be that next year, Spanish Fundamentals 1 would be discontinued, replaced with Conversational Spanish A. The following year, so that's 26, 27, Spanish Fundamentals 2 would go away, and so it would be followed by Conversational Spanish B. And that would set students up for success if they wanted to move into a third and then a fourth year of language in their junior and senior year to take Spanish 2 and Spanish 3. So it just sort of better aligns our curriculum and serves the needs of the students, as there are more opportunities for an expansion of what students can take as they move through high school, if that makes sense. Okay, social studies. So as many of you are probably aware, we spoke about this at a meeting last spring. For a lot of different reasons, I had proposed that we do a realignment in our high school scope and sequence. So the state of New Jersey, if you look at both the legislative mandates and the NJSLS, require us to do a 2-year sequence in American history and 1 year of world history in order to graduate from high school. We currently had it set up where World was in 9th grade, US 1 was in 10th grade, and US 2 was in 11th grade. In 2020, with the revision of the New Jersey Student Learning Standards, the world history content has gotten more and more nuanced, with a bigger emphasis on relation to current events, which, to be frank, from an academic perspective is really good. It's a good thing. The reality, though, is that it is harder for teachers to really hit that nuance with 9th graders in the way that the standards are currently written. The other thing that I had spoken to the board about last spring is that we offered students the opportunity to take AP World History in order to meet that requirement, which meant they were taking it as freshmen. As I had shown last spring, if you look at the data from our Challenge Success Survey, the amount of academic worry that students that were taking that class had was exponentially higher than students taking only one AP class at any other level in high school. And having taught AP World History myself for nearly a decade, it's a really hard class. And I have to really hand it to the teachers that have taught it. Ms. Maserani, Mr. Greppo have done a phenomenal job teaching it to freshmen, but it doesn't change the fact that it is a huge jump from 8th grade social studies to then go into AP World as a freshman. So it's sort of, there were two, both like an SEL perspective and then an academic content perspective. It made sense to move it out of freshman year. And so the proposal here is that we have US 1 move into 9th grade, US 2 in 10th grade, and then world history in 11th grade. So the way that that will look is that in 9th grade, students will have the opportunity to take either US 1 college prep or US 1 honors. In 10th grade, US 2 college prep, US 2 honors, or AP US history, which is what our current US history sequence looks like. And then their junior year, college prep world history, we will add an honors world history, which we currently don't have, in order to expand opportunities for students to take an honors level course, and AP world history. So I think that it serves the purpose of allowing teachers to really dive deeper into the nuances of the content as the current standards are written. It democratizes advanced placement courses for students, and it also adds this honors level for students that want to challenge themselves in the junior year. Unfortunately, we can't just like snap our fingers and do that overnight. It's a couple of years process to do that realignment. So for next year, and that's what's in this current iteration of the program of studies, 9th graders and 10th graders will both take US 1. So our current 8th graders, when they are in 9th grade, will take US 1 CP or US 1 honors, and our current 9th graders will do the same thing as 10th graders. So we'll have sections of US 1 honors and CP specifically for 9th grade, and sections of US 1 honors and CP specifically for 10th. In consultation with Dr. Daniel and Mr. Orlando, we didn't really think it made a lot of sense to have just a mishmash of 9th and 10th graders together. If you're an 8th grader in social studies who is just sort of making the cutoff, so to say, to go into honors US 1, and then you're sitting next to a sophomore who took AP World History as a freshman. Those are two very different skill sets that have been honed over the past year, so we thought it made better developmental sense to keep the 9th graders in one section and 10th graders in another. The other thing that we decided to do is that we don't want to just take AP World away for the next 2 years while we're trying to do this realignment. So we're going to offer AP World History to any student who is a junior or senior who has not already taken it. So if you were a student who took college prep World History as a freshman, Honors US 1 as a sophomore, AP US as a junior, you can now take AP World History as an elective as a senior. And we do have precedent with that because we have advanced biology and biology CP, and then we allow students to take advanced bio. So, and in fact, the district that I last taught in, that was how AP World worked. I taught the freshman World History course, and then I taught AP World as an elective to upperclassmen. So that's common practice as well. 2 other electives, that one is sort of an adjustment and one is brand new. We had an opportunity to partner with Kane University to offer a dual enrollment class. If you looked at our human rights and social justice course, if we were to put a bit of a heavier emphasis on Holocaust studies and essentially sort of look at the themes of the curriculum specifically around sort of the way that modern society has been shaped by these massive episodes in human history of genocide in particular, and how that's shaped more modern policy on an international level. We basically were able to partner with Kane and get their blessing to have the dual enrollment option. And so essentially what we're going to do is make some pretty slight tweaks to the curriculum as it is. The major one I would say is that we're going to move our unit on the Holocaust, which happens around the middle of the school year right now, to the beginning of the year, and we're going to expand it. So there'll be more of a focus on that. Not to say that other content and other areas of the world won't be addressed as they're currently written in the program of studies, but that'll just get a little bit more attention in order to be in line with Kane's dual enrollment option. The other thing, in consultation with the faculty members that help write the course, because it's mostly juniors and seniors that take it, we have it open for 10th graders as well, and because of this opportunity with Kane and sort of looking at what they were looking for more broadly, we decided that we're going to offer it as an honors section as well. So students have the option of taking this class as either college prep or honors. The only difference is that there will be some additional writing assignments for honors. So if students have the prerequisites and they would like to take the class for honors weight and take the class and then do a little bit of extra work, there will be that opportunity to do that as well. The last course that we're going to be offering, which is new, is early childhood development. It is going to be a full year course, and it is going to be open to 11th and 12th graders, and I will let Ms. Lubrano speak a little bit more about that.
So the objective for the early childhood development class is to allow our high school students to work directly with our new preschool program that will be up in the middle school, high school. So the teachers will be able to collaborate together, so there will be opportunities for the high school teachers to collaborate with our preschool staff. And then additionally, there will be opportunities for our students, our high school students, to work directly with our preschool students. So that will give them, both parties, an opportunity kind of to work together, but it will give our high school students an opportunity to see that development kind of take place live with our preschool students. So we really think this will be a great opportunity for both parties, for the high school students and the preschool students. Thank you.
And just on that, the reason it's going to live in social studies is there are obviously elements of the social sciences, specifically psychology, that live in that when we're looking at developmental psychology, early childhood development. I actually had a meeting with the school counselors this morning to go over the changes to the program of studies in the departments I oversee. And one of the things that I emphasize to them is that if there is a student who's considering becoming a teacher, this is a really good class for them to take, because part of the curriculum is going to include the really basic theories and sort of methods that you would need to do lesson planning, so that they're not just going in there and standing around and looking at the kids or picking up a book, but they'll have an understanding of things like center-based learning and helping to actually assist in the lessons with the teachers and help interface with the students in a really meaningful way. So I think it's going to be, I mean, who doesn't want to hang out with 3 and 4-year-olds all day, right? I mean, I have one that any of you can borrow if you miss that or want that. But in any event, I think it's going to be a really cool opportunity for these kids. And with the preschool coming up here, it's a really natural fit. And then lastly, in the business department, just really quickly, there were a couple of updates. Last summer, we gave an opportunity for students to take financial literacy online through New Jersey Virtual School. We offered it as a pilot. It was successful. The students that decided that they wanted to do it, and the main reason that they did is because if you're a student who looking at the overarching sort of plan of your transcript, sometimes getting that semester course in can be difficult if you're a student who's really into the arts and you want to take more arts classes, or if you're into more STEM, you want to try to take more science classes, it can be hard to fit that in. So we decided that after students navigated it well, they all felt that they had a solid understanding of the material. Teachers in the business department that have those students in classes this year feel that those students have a good working knowledge of the content. We decided that we would just open it up for everybody. So students have to file option 2 paperwork. It is due no later than April 1st. And then they would enroll in that class through New Jersey Virtual School. One of the things that I did highlight to the counselors, though, is that we have other courses in the business department that allow students to meet that financial literacy requirement. So that's our investing course, our CP economics course, and both of our AP economics courses, micro and macro. So sometimes I think students might jump at doing this because they're thinking of their bigger schedule longer term. But if you were going to take AP macroeconomics anyway, that would get that financial literacy requirement out. So I just wanted to make sure that the counselors had all of their students be informed consumers, so to say. Investing, we realized that, and actually I have to give credit to Ms. Hita, our teacher who's been teaching investing the last few years. Our curriculum aligned very well with Fairleigh Dickinson's investing course, so we're going to partner with them and we'll have another dual enrollment option. There's very little we have to do in order to offer that. And then lastly, there has been a lot of demand over the last few years from rising 9th graders for intro to business. And so we had only offered it grades 10 through 12, and when I sat down the 3 business teachers and I said, why are we not offering this to freshmen? They all sort of looked at each other and said, I'm not really sure. Freshmen could totally handle this course. So we decided that we would open it up. And again, all of these are really just in service of trying to give students more options and expand the opportunities. So thank you, and congratulations to everybody who was installed tonight. I think we're good, right? You're done? Yeah. Thank you.
That's it?
Sorry, I thought there was one more, but yes, thank you very much. Any questions for them?
Yeah. Questions? For the course changes that are here, is that going to affect our staffing in any way?
None of these changes affect our staffing, right? We have licensed people to do it and the people in place to do so. Yeah.
And for the conversation in Spanish,
Yep.
which I think is a really good idea, how is that going to be reflected on a student's transcript? Because they could take the A, the B, and then Spanish too, so it would be 3 years of Spanish. How is it going to reflect on their transcripts if colleges are looking at it?
So it'll be 3 years of Spanish. You would take conversational A would
It will say
be
conversational A,
conversational B, and then Spanish, Spanish 2. Yep.
and that will be looked upon as like 3 years of it, not like consolidating or spreading out Spanish 1 over 2 years. You know what I'm saying?
If you want to speak to that, yeah.
So when I update the school profile each year, I'll update that as the full year
Okay.
course of it. So when any post-secondary options, if they look at our school profile, which is what they typically do when they're reviewing a transcript, they will see that those count for those required years.
Okay, so it's not going to hurt a student if they
No.
take the, okay. And then my last, it's more of a
it is a question. So we have the detailed program of studies, which explains, classes and how you can get into honors, how you can get into AP. That information, how is that information shared with the staff, the students, and the parents? Because sometimes there seems like there's a disconnect where I'm not sure everybody understands what that actually means and what's involved with appealing or asking to go to a higher level class. So how is that information given out to all the stakeholders, not just us sitting here at the table?
So typically when I lay out for the year, the grading, and when the grading portal's open for the teachers, I will release a summary as to what's included in that. I believe did you give it to them in their department, the last department meeting? They have a whole outline of it, especially for marking period 2, so the teachers and staff get an outline of what the grading is and how to recommend a student for their courses. So they get all of that. I release it in School Messenger to all parents, in addition to it being in the program of studies, and I release it on Schoology as well. It outlines all of the scheduling process, the appeals process, the deadlines, and I usually like to send a few reminders as they're getting close to those deadlines. So, the financial literacy option 2, that's going to be due on April 1st. They'll get a few reminders for that. So the communication is pretty frequent. It's usually,
With all the emails are fine, but I think we all know that sometimes we get overwhelmed with our emails. Is there ever like a time when the parents are in the building where, even like back to school night, maybe somebody could be set up somewhere and just be there to answer questions, or so everybody understands
Sure.
what that entails? I just think more ways that it's out there, or actually sometimes having a conversation is easier to understand something than looking at it on a piece of paper.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that we can implement. It's also, we also are pretty thorough in all the course selection meetings. We invite all parents to come to that as well, and we review all of that. If there's an appeals scenario, we usually like to have that completed before they leave the course selection meeting, so that we know that it's complete and it's finalized, so that nothing slips through the cracks. But yeah, we're always open to implementing.
Right, you just want to make sure people are getting the information, right, and getting it out there as many ways as we can to alleviate some of the issues that could arise from people not understanding.
Sure.
And we can only do so much, but
Absolutely.
the more we can do, I think, is just better for everybody. And the kids are told about the program of studies and the process if they want to.
So probably tomorrow or early this week, I will
Right.
release on Schoology and all the platforms the link to where everything is kind of housed. It's housed on the website, and it's going to be a link that kind of outlines everything. But in my emails and my documentation, I'll further discuss everything. But the main hub for everything is going to be on the website.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
If I could just jump in on one other part that I think is an important communication piece, and that's the faculty. So the supervisors meet with the departments once a month in department meetings, and I think it's this upcoming department meeting, in some cases, I know Ms. Craples, for example, had spoken about it at her department meeting in December. Some of us, it'll be in January. We go through the program of studies requirements, and we make it very clear to the faculty that these are not student requests, these are professional recommendations. And I'll be honest, I think that collectively, from the student's perspective, as well as from the faculty perspective, we need to continue to remember that that we're all on the same team, right? So if a teacher is making a recommendation for a student's placement, it's based on that teacher's professional judgment. So as an example, one of the things that I tell the social studies teachers, we have a ton of AP electives that kids can take their senior year or their junior year. I tell the teachers, if you think that a student can handle any AP course, recommend them for any AP course. Don't, if Manny walks up to you and says, I want to take AP Psych, and then you make the recommendation for AP Psych, but you don't have the recommendation for AP Gov, well, then we have an appeals process concern, right? So that's something that we've really been working on the last few years. I also think that we have done a good job in working with the faculty, that they have a very frank conversation with their classes when they start talking about the recommendations that they're going to be putting in. So there shouldn't be surprises when a student logs into Genesis and they see what they've been recommended for. When they get to that course scheduling meeting, they see, all right, I've been recommended for honors, or I've been recommended for AP, or I've been recommended for CP. And then to Dr. Daniels' point, there is that opportunity if they would like to appeal that, they can. But I think that one of the things I'm hoping we can continue to work toward together is that the parents and the students understand that the faculty are making recommendations really based on what they think is going to, where the student is going to be most successful. Nobody's trying to hold anybody back or push anybody too hard, but, you know, really look at what those recommendations are on the chart in the program of studies, and then turn around and say, you know, based on how you've done this year, I really think that this would be the best class for you to take. Even with that a student can disagree with that recommendation the other way, right? Like I might recommend a kid for AP, and that kid may say, you know what, I did well in your class in honors. I think I'm going to stick with honors, though I don't necessarily want to take that AP. And that's where the school counselors really come in helping a student put their schedule together. So it is extensively discussed with the faculty as well.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for your presentation, as well as that comprehensive review of the recommendations process. All right.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right. So next, we have Mr. Matt Lee, who has generously provided us with his time to talk about an ethics update, as well as our roles and responsibilities. I asked Mr. Lee to come to talk to us, not only because of our board certification process, but because as the start of a new board year, we have some new board members, we have a lot of changing. I think that it's really helpful for us to really get a sense of what our responsibility is, what our role is, how to, be ethical board members and effective board members, and no better time to start than our first board meeting for the year. So it is an honor and privilege. Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. And everyone has these presentations, again, in backup as well, just in case, like, you want to, be focused. Thank you.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having me in. As Dr. Robinson explained, my name is Matt Lee. I am from the NJSBA. For folks who aren't familiar with NJSBA, I will dispense with a very sort of common misapprehension, which is that we're the state. We're not the state. We don't have authority over boards. We are an association that basically is in place to support you in your role as board members. And we do that through training, we do it through advocacy, and we do it through some other services like strategic planning and superintendent search, and also legal advice. No, I shouldn't say legal advice, but legal guidance. Myself, very quickly, I was a board member for 20 years, even though I'm only 32. And I also have been in this role for, it'll be 9 years in June, working strictly in Bergen County. So I just wanted to give you a little sense of my exposure to this material. And, I'm certainly here to answer questions, whether it be tonight, or you can reach me via email, via phone. I'm always available. So, as mentioned, we're going to do two programs tonight. The first is roles and responsibilities. This is a very common sort of refresher, but also introduction to new board members that we take around to many boards across the state during the beginning of the year. And then the second will be an ethics presentation, again, something very common for us to bring to boards at the very beginning, because it takes in a lot of the new advisories and the new commissioner decisions that have come out around ethics. And it's helpful, especially for new board members, to understand the parameters around their ethical obligations. So let's start with our agenda for roles and responsibilities. Basically, we're going to be talking about what you do, and in some cases what you don't do. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how to ensure that your meeting is actually an effective meeting and productive and works toward moving the agenda of the board forward. Can't say it enough that the most important thing that happens between a board together as a unit and also through administration is thinking about students first. making sure that you work to maintain good working relationships with yourselves as a governance body and also with administration, and understanding that you're all working together, moving in the same direction with the same goals. And again, trust is the foundation of all of this. If the trust isn't there between those parties that we talked about, things can get very difficult. So we want to focus on communication. We want to make sure we're being fair and consistent, and also that we are showing empathy and understanding not only for students, but also for the work of our staff. So there's a lot of research done into the way boards operate, and some of the main things that we've derived over the years about what makes an effective board leadership team. And it starts with having that shared mission and or a vision that you can constantly go back to and refer to as sort of your North Star, your guiding light for how you actually execute your function as a governance team. Also, maintaining that climate of trust that we talked about, making sure that everybody understands roles, whether it be the role of the board president/vice president, the role of the administration, or the role of the governance team versus that of administration. Making sure we're communicating honestly and in a timely manner, understanding that there are going to be differences in opinion, and those are valuable, right? As long as they're conducted in the right way, that's what you hope for, is to get different viewpoints out and then to come to consensus and move forward with the entire board supporting that consensus once it is reached. And then lastly, making sure that our primary focus is always on the students of our district. We talk about how boards should be looking at what happens in a district, and the analogy is made that there's a dance floor and the board members are not down on the floor executing dance moves. The board is up in the balcony and they're overseeing everything that happens. The board's role is that 10,000-foot level. It's not the day-to-day details of the district. Those are left to administration. So think about that 10,000-foot view and how you're looking at the entire broad picture rather than some of the very sort of minute details that happen day-to-day in the district. 4 functions are a pretty common set of parameters that a board operates around. First, of course, is policy. It's one of the board's main jobs to develop the policy that is the blueprint for the administration to go ahead and run the district. The next one is the planning piece, and planning very much relates to that balcony view that we talked about. That's the strategic, overall, long-term vision for the district. That's where the bulk of our work and our discussion happens, right? All the stuff that's happening day to day is kind of settled already, but where are we going to go? That's what we're looking for the board to sort of direct. Appraisal. As we know, the board has one employee, right? And that employee is superintendent, right? You, as the governing body of the district, are responsible for evaluating the performance of that superintendent. So that appraisal piece, not only looking over the superintendent's job, but also keeping an eye on how the various programs in the district are progressing. Are they meeting the goals that were set out by the Board of Education? And those are the appraisal pieces of our role. And the last one is a little bit tricky because if you don't pay attention to the words provide for, right, you may be getting the wrong idea about the communication piece of a board's role. This is making sure that a board has, or a district I should say, has a robust two-way communications program in place, right? And that means that the board not only sees what's going on and understands that it's effective, but also that it's properly resourcing a communication function as well. So those are the 4 main functions of a board. One of the other things that's pretty common for new board members to not really be exposed to is that they are actually state officials, okay? And the way it sort of flows down from the, sort of highest levels of the state down to your local board works like this. The New Jersey Constitution gives the legislature the responsibility for educating all students in New Jersey. The legislature then gives oversight of that function to the State Board of Education. The State Board staff, which is the day-to-day folks in the DOE, carries out the mandates of the higher bodies. So whatever direction is given to it by the legislature and or the State Board is incumbent upon the DOE to execute. And then within all those laws and regulations, and within is the operative word there, local boards can adopt policies that help them implement that in their local districts. With the understanding that all the policies that the board adopts have to be what is for the best, what provides for the best education for all students in the district. Also that they should be listening to community input when they are adopting policy and understanding how that policy is going to impact the entire district. And also important for board members to understand that they only have the authority that's given to them through the state when they're sitting at a legally advertised meeting of the board. Other than that, you don't have any more authority outside of what a regular citizen has. Important to remember. When we talk about the division of roles between the board and the superintendent, you can see kind of clearly that these pieces of the role revolve around two sort of high-level words, and that is what and how. What is the role of the board? And you can think about it as concentrating on outcomes. What are the outcomes that we're looking for? Okay? The how piece is left to the administration. Now, obviously, the board has oversight about how those things progress, and it also appraises administration on how those things progress. But the design and execution of the how part of any of those goals is left to administration. So you can see, starting at the top of the chart that we have here, the roles and responsibilities of the board: vision, mission, goals, policy. The superintendent, in contrast, objectives, procedures, action plans, regulations. That's the nitty-gritty. That's how we get stuff done, right? That's what those action items are going to look like, and also how long are they going to take, and what are the things that we're going to look at in order to make sure that they're happening well. In terms of focus, board, as we mentioned, focus on end results or outcomes. What is it we're trying to get to, right? And then the superintendent and his or her administration focus on the means: how, when, where, by whom, et cetera. How are the things going to get actually executed? And lastly, the board votes and evaluates. The superintendent recommends and implements. So I think it's a pretty clear distinction between what the roles look like. Yeah, Molly, go ahead.
If we have any questions or any clarification, do you want it to be interactive?
All along the way.
Or just all along the way? Okay.
Yep.
All right. When we, because as I look at something that commonly comes up in the community is about well, what does administration recommend, or what does our CSA recommend, and things like that, and what is our responsibility in terms of when we are recommended something, what am I looking at when I'm, voting on it? Like, let's say, I don't know, what's a good, can anyone think of a good example of like a recommendation that's made? Huh? Okay, a new position. If the administration decides that they, have gone through their process and are recommending a new position, and it's presented to us at the board, and then we're voting on it, what is our responsibility when we're looking at the vote? And, what are people appraising? Like, what's within our realm to vote on, and what's not within our realm to vote on? Like, we can't just say, or can we just say, oh, we don't want that position, or is it more along the lines of, well, this is something that's needed, and we're acknowledging that, and, what
So I'm going to answer generally, not specifically against the creation of a new position. Generally speaking, what's going to happen is you shouldn't end up with a resolution, certainly of that scale, out of the blue, right? So what ends up on the board agenda is usually the product of prior discussion in committee where in-depth questions may be asked to understand the full scope of what's being requested by administration.
And if we're in a committee of the whole. So,
Same dynamic is present, right? You can ask all those questions. The one sort of drawback you may have operating as committee of the whole is when it comes to personnel, there are certain things that you can't discuss without going into executive session. But certainly, the idea there is that, something is brought to you by administration or something is brought up by a board member. Research is conducted, right? As long as it's not at the behest of a single board member, right? Because you don't want to expend a lot of time and resources to just satisfy one person's curiosity, right? If you're going to expend that valuable resource of administrative time, it should be the will of the majority of the board, right? Then it basically be a conversation about what are the things that are making you make this request or recommendation. How are we going to know that this is successful? What are the things that we should be looking for over time? And, do we have the money for it? Do we budget for it? Is it something we need right away? Can we plan for it next year? All those kinds of questions are very valid questions. At a certain point, clear and convincing case is made, the board buys in, it goes onto an agenda, people vote on it. Should you be working in smaller committees, then that in-depth questioning that may happen in a committee of the whole environment would, to a larger extent, happen in the committee environment. And then the discussion points would be brought to the full board to consider, along with some of the things that you may not be moving forward with. But that's where that trust piece comes in. So if you're going to have smaller committees, you have to have an element of trust on your board that the committee that is dealing with that particular issue is asking the questions that the rest of the board might have asked as well. I hope that hit the target.
I think so.
Yeah? Okay. All right. Okay, so yeah, policymakers, we talked about this already. You're providing direction to the superintendent with policy and a basis for decision-making, not only for administration, but also for yourselves. Well-crafted policies minimize ambiguity, and the bylaws section of your policy manual is the rules and regs that you've adopted as a board in order to run yourselves, right? So it's a specific place in your policy manual. We talk about the visionaries piece, the goal setting, the planning aspect from our 4 functions, setting up standards for quality instruction, making sure that your budget supports all the initiatives that you're going to undertake in the district, and then also holding the administration accountable for making sure that the goals that were set in place are progressed. And last piece, that communicators piece, provide two-way communication between the community and the school district and inform the public, promote public participation in schools, whether that be at meetings or in other potential activities, and work to secure public support for the schools and district goals. So that may be something that you were alluding to earlier, Dr. Robinson, when you asked, well, when people ask, how do we come to that decision? Well, when you have that narrative down, you can explain those things and thereby, gain support and trust from the community. Yeah.
Can you expand on the other activities? I feel like communications is something that we've talked about working on and seeing value and doing a better job of exactly what that last bullet said. But can you give examples of other than meetings, because not everyone attends meetings or watches meetings. If they did, I think they'd feel informed and better, but just those activities that you mentioned, can you just expand on what that is or could be?
Yeah, they could literally be anything. They could be, family math nights. They could be college, what do they used to call them? College prep nights, college nights, right? And making sure that people know about those and are encouraged to attend. Sometimes it takes the shape of strategic planning, for example. That's a case where you would invite the public in to talk about what direction they would like to see for the schools going forward. So there's a whole bunch of different things, and they don't have to be completely relevant to the entire community. They could be just for sections of the community, but making sure that those are promoted and that, it's a welcoming environment for parents and community members who want to come and speak. Yeah. Okay, superintendent's role. So we talk about chief advisor to the board. So obviously the superintendent is bringing you recommendations, talking about certain issues, giving you the background on them, and then making recommendations to the board. The superintendent is the staff's liaison to the board, which means that if there are issues coming up from staff that need to be addressed at the board level, that the superintendent is speaking for the staff in those cases. Briefings on district operations. Of course, there are, the board is watching and appraising the performance of the superintendent. It's beneficial to the superintendent to come to you on a regular basis and tell you what are the things that are happening and the things that are being achieved in the district. And then the last piece in that column is evaluating and assessing policy implementation. So when the policies that you adopt are applied, there's a period under which you have to kind of watch and see if that was really getting the intended result when you adopted the policy. And if it's not, there's recommendations. When we'll have to, tweak this language, we'll have to maybe adopt something extra to deal with something we hadn't anticipated. So the superintendent is looking at all of those things. The next column, the executive officer, obviously administering the policies when they're adopted, putting them in place and making sure that they are used within the district day to day. Running the district, of course, the chief education officer of the district, providing progress updates and including emergent issues. So, I'm not going to say it out loud, but if a boiler goes down or something, you guys got to know about that, right? Accountable to the board for how well the district is run. Obviously, that's part of the appraisal piece. And directing the staff members through personal action and action of delegates. In other words, being the manager of the managers, right? And the last piece being the educational leader, remaining active in professional organizations and staying up to date with all the new trends and directions in education. Another way to look at it, the implementer in chief, if you will. So we talked about that recipe for success before, a good relationship between the board and the superintendent. The board needs to have trust in the superintendent. The superintendent needs to give the board loyalty and their best advice. We want to respect the professional training and experience of the superintendent. And the superintendent, on their part, wants to provide competent management of the schools. And lastly, confidence in the CSA's ability to administer the district and see that the board's policies are implemented. So, quiz time. Item appears on the screen. Decide if it's a board responsibility or superintendent responsibility.
Board.
Let's see if we're right. Yes, board. Oversee instructional programs.
Superintendent.
What was that?
Superintendent.
Okay. Very good. Approve curricular materials.
Board.
Look at you guys. Recommend and implement policy.
Super.
Oh. Oversee district leadership.
Superintendent.
That's a little tricky, right?
Yeah, like.
Are we just talking about the superintendent, or are we talking about the next level?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Administer contracts.
Superintendent. He said administer, so administer. The superintendent.
Yeah, of course, that's day to day, right? Establish and adopt policy.
Board.
Very good. Last one.
That's the board.
Board.
Look at you guys, you're awesome. Okay. So at the risk of being redundant, working together is really going to be the most effective thing. If you're not working together, then things become much more complicated and difficult. Cardinal rule, right? No surprises. We never want to roll into a board meeting and learn about something, very of a large scale that happened in the districts and we didn't know about it already, right? So if that boiler did blow up, we don't want to show up to the meeting and just learn that, right? By the same token, it's not fair to drop a bomb in the middle of a meeting for the superintendent, right? So, if there's going to be, a large contingent at the meeting with a particular issue on their mind and board members are aware of that, that should be something that the superintendent has a heads up about from the board so that everybody, comes off looking like they are on the same page and as informed as they should be about the issues that are going on. Yeah, we talked about this earlier, and this is really sort of an offshoot of the Open Public Meetings Act, which is that when you're a board member and you're operating in the context of a board meeting, that's the only place you can exercise your authority, right? When you're sitting in a quorum of the board in a legally constituted meeting. Other than that, you are just a regular citizen of the town. You don't have any authority anywhere else in the district. So a couple other things. Individual board members can't make decisions for the board, right? Can't take actions for the board. There's a lot about that in ethics that we'll talk about. Can't speak for the board unless you've been authorized to do so. We say check your policy manual, but that's typically one of your bylaws is who is the spokesperson for the board. And we'll see that there's a distinction between the spokesperson for the district and the spokesperson for the board, right? Board members can't direct any staff member or administrator, right? If something has to be communicated to the staff, that should be presented to the superintendent, who can then make a decision about whether or not that needs to be brought down to the staff level or whether that can be resolved between the board and the superintendent. And lastly, individual board members cannot direct the superintendent. And this goes back to what we talked about before, which is that the superintendent is basically a resource, right? He or she has limited time and limited focus. It's only 24 hours in a day. So if the superintendent needs to undertake a significant task, it should be at the behest of the board majority, right? Because they're the only ones who should decide how that valuable resource is applied. Right? It's another count to 5, right? That's how you get things done on a board. Unless you have 10 members, then you got to count to 6. Takes a majority to accomplish anything. Of course, we just talked about that. Finding common ground on the behalf of the whole community is really where the board does its significant work. Getting to consensus, then moving forward and supporting that consensus because the majority of the governing body has spoken. That doesn't mean that you don't have significant debate. You should. But once the majority has set a direction, that is the time for the minority who have had their chance to speak to fall in behind the majority and support the initiative because that is where the majority of the board wants to head. And, of course, if you don't give the opportunity for that debate, for all voices to be heard, eventually that's going to erode any trust that the board may have built up between each other, right? I won't go over the code of ethics now because we're going to go over that in the next presentation. Boards kind of think of themselves as a middleman, which is appropriate. So you are the voice of the community to administration, and you also are ambassadors to the community in that you are making sure that this is a welcoming place for community members. This doesn't mean you're going around individually speaking to every community member that you come across. You are just conducting yourselves in a way such that your community realizes that Glen Rock Public Schools want to hear from them and are welcoming them into their activities in their buildings. Yeah, so there's a whole piece around active listening. Some of the things that we've talked about with boards in the past are the comportment of the board at a meeting, especially when boards are under pressure from the public with certain issues. This active listening piece, making sure that you are engaged and respectful and you are, listening for those things that are key to that person's issue. All of that stuff is really important so that the community feels heard by the board. It doesn't mean that you are going to do whatever the public is clamoring for or that you're going to agree in any way, shape, or form, but it is important that you respectfully listen to those things that they're being brought to you by the public. Couple questions. So you have children in the school. How can I talk with their teachers now that I'm on the school board? How do you go about that?
Well, yeah,
Sorry? I'm sorry, Sinead, I'm so old. You could, yeah. Come on.
in the context of parent-teacher relations, or if there's a parent-teacher conference and things, I just talk only from the perspective of being a parent. I actually, in this district, don't even know that my daughter's teacher actually knows that I don't know that. I've never had that interface to say
They know.
I am, so I just speak to her or him like I am
Yeah, so
a parent.
I was on the board for a long time. I had 3 kids go through schools. And what I found was the best approach was to sit down at that conference and go, I know you know I'm on the board, but I'm only here because I want to talk about Kevin, right? And it's not just for you do that to kind of protect yourself. It can also put a staff member at ease because they know they're talking to a board member, right? And you'll be surprised, sometimes staff will look at a board member sitting in front of them and go, ooh, this is an opportunity to get a point across. And that kind of puts that wall up, if you will, around that conversation such that if you have a board thing, I'm not here for that tonight. I want to talk about my child, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't lose any ability to be an advocate for your child when you become a board member. But you do have to take care to keep those 2 roles separate, okay? Is it okay to visit the schools?
Yeah. I guess, under what context? Are you saying if I want to show up and say, oh, I want to tour something, then no.
Now,
Yeah,
can you go on a tour of the schools? Yeah, sure.
it's arranged.
Arrange it through administration, do your tour, and exit the building, right? And if you're in the schools for a volunteer activity, who knows? Pick one. That's not an opportunity to finish that activity and go check up on things, right? Same thing, finish that activity and exit the building. If you have something to do in the context of your board role, arrange that through the superintendent. Okay. How do you respond to parents calling and emailing about district staff or other concerns?
Turn on your mic.
I'm an HSA liaison where I
Yeah.
have 3 children there, so I will hear things. And
Sure.
Give the opportunity to say, hey, that's a great topic, thanks for sharing it, maybe I can pass that along. It kind of takes the topic away from being discussed, and I can pass it along through the president, to the superintendent, and have
Yep.
that trickle back down that way.
Yeah, go ahead.
Remind people of a kind of chain of command, like where to start. Instead of going straight to the super, did you talk to the teacher, you know, and I think that's always helpful.
Yeah, and you'll be surprised how many times people don't understand that, but it's not shocking, right? They don't operate in this environment like board members do, like staff members do. So the chain of command may be a completely foreign concept to them. But it's the one that works to make sure that there's ample opportunity to solve the problem before it gets to the administrative level, right? They're also the best people positioned to solve that problem because it's normally about a child in school or something that happened on a sports field or something of that nature. That's not for a board member to solve. You're not in the schools day to day. You're well removed from any of those things that would give you the ability to help solve that. So you refer them back to where the issue began, the sports field, the club, the classroom, try to resolve it with the teacher, and then move up the supervisory chain of command, right? I would have said this in the ethics presentation, but I'll do it now and save a little time. Board members need to refer to the chain of command because board members act as the court of last resort in the district. What that means is that if there isn't satisfactory resolution to a problem that's been brought to the staff, it could end up before the board. If it does, and the board member's been involved in that, taking a side, making recommendations, et cetera, they've compromised their ability, to render an impartial decision once you do have to act on it, should that day come. So you're allowed to listen and understand a problem, that's human nature, but send them to the place where it can most likely be resolved, which is where it occurred to start with, and then let it progress. Okay. That's the chain of command, so we just did that. Provide access to your public, we talked about that already. Your job is not to run the schools, but to see they're well run. I can't read that because yellow on that background doesn't work. You guys have a copy, you can read it.
Yeah.
And we have a puppy. Perfect. Chain of command. Okay. Yep, talked about that. This is where we talked about bylaws and being, yep.
With the previous slide with the chain of command, when it says do not solicit, can you
Yeah, that's a good point.
Expound on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a board member's role to go out and try and surface issues that may not be widespread within the community. Those things will get themselves to either the staff or the board at some point. Soliciting for those things can give the impression that the board member is taking sides and/or speaking for the board. And as we can see in our ethics presentation later, that can be a real problem for board members. So it's not our job to go out and beat the bushes looking for problems. They will surface. Anything else there that you wanted to clarify?
No, I think everything goes to what you were saying before with chain of command.
Yeah, one thing I'll use that last bullet real quick as a jumping off point for this. One thing I didn't say about the chain of command is that if it does come to a board member's attention that somebody is about to enter the chain of command with an issue, it's a great idea to give the superintendent a heads up. Quick call, quick text, quick email, and just let them know, hey, I just heard about something that happened at the soccer game on Saturday. You may hear about this. And then you're out of it, right? Yeah.
specific to that, now,
Sure.
do you go to the board president or directly to the superintendent?
That is a local issue. You guys can develop your own protocols for how you want that to go. As you can imagine, there's many different flavors of board. So whatever works for you guys locally makes the most sense. Yeah.
So if the board is the step of last resort, right? What is the role of the open comments in a board meeting? Because that's like skipping the whole process and going to the board. So like, what's our role in the, like, why does it exist and what's our role with open comments?
You mean public comment at a board meeting? So that's to be compliant with the Open Public Meetings Act. Okay, the Open Public Meetings Act says that the public has a right to be at any meeting in which a majority of the board is talking about interests that may affect them, okay? In addition, they have the right to comment at those meetings, and comment is a very important distinction to make. You don't want to get into a dialogue situation in a board meeting. There's a million reasons why, but probably chiefly is that you probably don't have the resources sitting at that table to solve any problems, right? So if someone wants to make a comment about something that's going on in the schools and they want some kind of a follow-up, fine. The administration can designate someone to follow up with them, but it's not something for the board to try and solve at the table. Basically, it's an opportunity for the community to let the board know what's on their mind, but they shouldn't be expecting that this is where problems get fixed. Does that make sense? Okay. Going back to spokesperson, the superintendent by policy is a spokesperson for the district. What gets communicated to the community and the parents most often? District stuff, right? The board president by policy is a spokesperson for the board. Are there occasions in which the board needs to speak directly to the public? Sometimes, not often, right? But if, let's just say, the boiler blew up again and the press calls and they get a hold of Dr. Robinson and they say, hey, what happened with that? She has the ability to act upon that and deliver any information that she might want to. But more than likely, she's going to say, you should really, I would really like to refer you to the superintendent for that. Now, if it turned into something like, let's say you were to embark on strategic planning in the district. Well, strategic planning is an outgrowth of the board's planning function, and that might be a perfect opportunity for the board president to communicate directly with the public and say, hey, I'd love for everybody in the community to show up to these 3 meetings. Please come. You can help the board develop a fuller picture of what we want for the future of the district. And that, again, is inviting them into what's basically a board function, right? That makes sense? Yeah. Okay. Emails. If emails come out from administration or from the board officers to the board, that should be one-way information. Why? Because when that turns into a dialogue, that becomes an unadvertised board meeting. And that's illegal. It goes against the Sunshine Law. If you go back to the language of the Sunshine Law, it says that the public has a right to be at any meeting in which their interests are being discussed or acted upon. If you're having a conversation via email, that's what's happening, right? So, one-way information pushed out is okay. If you have a question about that, you can reach back in a singular fashion to whoever distributed it, whether it be administration or the board president, and ask for clarification or whatever, but you can't do that to the whole board. And BCC doesn't work, right? Can't do that either. I saw you guys thinking about that. And that's where that never, ever reply to all comes from, right? That constitutes a public meeting, and you can't have that.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So if we were going to put out information, say, we'd want the whole board to have. We'd send the email to the entire board, one-way communication.
Yep.
Is it best practice to write on there for informational purposes only, please do not reply all? Do we put some sort of a
It never
disclaimer on?
hurts. That's a good practice to get into.
Okay.
Hopefully, the concept is understood by everyone that, you really can't do that. But I do see that often from board presidents who take great care to make sure people don't reply back. Yep.
And would that also, I commonly do that if I'm pushing information out. But if a board member wants to send an email, then I would say, well, you could tell me if I'm wrong. I would prefer it to come to me or something, and then I would push it out, as opposed to a board member pushing out one directional information to the entire board.
Again, that would be up to your established protocols in your district. I would say that it would be a best practice, right? Because you're supposed to be kind of the quarterback of the board. So, yeah, I think that's up for you guys to establish those. Important to use your district email address for board communication. Why? What's that? Oprah. Exactly right. Not just Oprah, though, right? So we have records retention responsibilities because we're state officials, right? So you can't be deleting stuff. Also, if you were using, for example, your work email and the board were to be involved in litigation, they could go into your business and look for all information that was relevant to your board service, right? So you really want to use your district email address for all board business. Social media, we can talk about this now. We have it in ethics as well, but it's strongly recommended you don't have a board member social media account, because that account basically puts you in a position of speaking for the board in people's minds, right? If a reasonable person can infer that you are speaking for the board, you have a problem, right? Strongly recommend not belonging to any private groups on social media. Why? Because anything you do as a state official should be accessible to the entire public, not to just a private Facebook group, right? It's all public communication. So having a limited Facebook group is not good. Use your disclaimer stating that while you're a board member, you're not speaking for the board and your comment does not reflect the opinion of the board. That disclaimer is not a security blanket necessarily. If the context of what you're saying is contrary to that disclaimer in any way or can be interpreted that way, the disclaimer is basically useless, right? You can still get yourself in trouble by what you said. And content is really the deciding factor as opposed to whether or not you have the disclaimer. This is a recommended disclaimer. You don't have to use this exact wording, but they actually want you to put it in bold and italics. They've actually recommended that. So basically, you have to have all the salient points of a statement which was put forward by the SEC in anything that you are communicating publicly that could be connected to your board service. Okay, we did that. All right. Good. Any other questions? All right, who's ready for ethics? Yes?
The case with the disclaimer was an actual case that happened at?
Many, actually.
Okay.
Yep. The concept behind using a disclaimer has been around for 50-odd years. And, before electronic communication was prevalent, it was really around sort of the letters to the editor kinds of things you would see in a newspaper, because that's kind of the way you got public information out back then. But it applies to any medium now.
Is there specific examples that you can share with us just to see what people, like, how did they state something that was contradictory to disclaimers or so?
Yeah, there's probably a ton of examples. I don't have a specific one I can point to right now.
If you can share with us now.
So, yeah, there's the cases that are resolved by the School Ethics Commission. We're going to talk about that now.
Sure.
And then there's also advisory opinions from the School Ethics Commission. Ooh, thank you very much. And those provide a lot of context around that. I will caution you, they all read like legal proceedings, so drink your coffee before you read them.
Matt, I have a question. You
Yeah.
said, ever posting on any private group, there's Facebook private groups that are inclusive of all, Glen Rockers or whatever. If you make a comment on something totally not board related, do you have a recommendation on how to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about your cat or your breakfast cereal,
Doesn't
knock yourself
matter.
out. But anything that you're going to say that could be interpreted as
A board issue.
adjacent to even your board issues, like if you were to comment for something going on in the town, for example, and it could be connected to your board service in some way by a reasonable person, that could get you in trouble as well. So, yeah, I mean, if you have a knitting group on Facebook and you're just going to talk about knitting, I don't see where you would be vulnerable, but you have to watch. And I will take this opportunity to say that I'm not an attorney, and your board attorney is really your best resource when you have questions about ethics. What's that?
But we can't go to them, right? Only our board president.
Yeah, I mean, and you have to follow all those things, of course, but you can also call NJSBA. We have an attorney of the day service that you are free to access. You don't need anybody's permission to do so. I will caution you, though, they will take great pains to tell you I'm not giving you legal advice. I'm giving you some background or some guidance, right? They defer to your board attorney as they should, right? Your board attorney is the person who's going to have to defend you, for example, if something goes wrong. So they're the advice you should take. Okay? All right. I'm going to be judicious in what we go over because we touched on a number of these things already. So we're going to start with the School Ethics Act. The School Ethics Act, which was passed in 1991, basically said it was essential that the conduct of local boards of education and local administrators hold the respect and the confidence of the people they served. They said board members and administrators need to avoid conduct that's in violation of the public trust or which creates a justifiable impression that the public trust is being violated. Lots of examples of that as we go forward. Along with the Ethics Act, the legislative intent of the act was to ensure and preserve public confidence, and in order to help facilitate that, it was recommended that officials have the benefit of some specific standards, and that manifested itself in the Code of Ethics, and then also a disciplinary mechanism, which is now in the form of the School Ethics Commission. The Ethics Commission has also emphasized on a couple of points that the ethical standards that are in place are the minimum ethical standards that need to be adhered to by school officials. Okay, provisions of the Act and accountability. There are provisions that apply to board members and trustees only, and that is the Code of Ethics and the mandatory training requirements. And then there are those that apply to all school officials. And you can see in that footnote there, that takes in board members, administrators, principals, business administrators, et cetera, and even some NJSBA staff. So yes, even though I'm almost 30 years from my first year as a board member, I still fill out ethics forms every year. Who enforces the act? School Ethics Commission does so. It's important to know that the School Ethics Commission is the only authority over individual board member behavior. The local boards of education don't have the ability to regulate the behavior of their own members. with one exception, which is that if a board member misses 3 meetings in a row, the board can vote to have that board member removed. Okay, so School Ethics Commission is a 9-member body. It's appointed by the governor for a 3-year term, max of 5 from any one political party. It's always 5 non-school officials, 2 school board members, 2 school administrators. It is not, however, always fully staffed. In fact, it is rarely fully staffed. Currently, both school board member seats are open, and 1 school administrator seat is open, which means there's only 6 members. I thought there was a different slide next. Okay, why is that important? It's important because in order to release an advisory opinion to the public in general, 2/3 of the School Ethics Commission has to vote that way. Sometimes there's only been 5 members of the School Ethics Commission, and regardless of how many seated members there are, you need 6 votes. So with only 5 seated members, no advisory opinions could be pushed out to the public, therefore depriving a lot of the state of guidance which will be useful. Then, of course, when they do finally get staffed up enough to release opinions, they release a bajillion at once, and then everybody scrambles to figure out how to stay compliant. So that's the SEC. Disclosure statements, they need to be filled out by new school officials within 30 days of being sworn in or starting work. And then returning school officials, there's an April 30 filing deadline. You will all have that presented to you in short order, I'm sure, and your business administrator will be giving you very gentle reminders along the way. Mandatory training. As of 2023, the Governance 1 requirement was changed from a full year to the first 90 days. You must take Governance 1, which is new board member orientation, within 90 days of being sworn in. It's basically, you know, the rudiments of board service, goes over CUSAC, HIB, superintendent eval, et cetera. There are a number of opportunities to do Governance 1. Highly recommend new board member orientation in person. It's a weekend. There's one in late February and one in March. And I believe registration is open now. You do need your district email address in order to register. That would get you down there on a Friday evening. You would be there a full day Saturday until noon on Sunday. Not only do you get the coursework, but you also meet a lot of board members from across the state. You gather in small groups and have discussion. It's highly beneficial. Would recommend it if you can possibly do it. There are other options for that and for all the others as well. You can do in-person. We have them scheduled throughout the state. They'll be on our website for you to just kind of pick out the dates that work for you. There's a live virtual option. That, for Governance 1 especially, is 3 different evenings of live virtual. Once again, we have breakouts and discussions and things like that, but you must attend all 3 in order to get credit for it. If you miss one, start from scratch. And then there's a self-paced online. That, again, is kind of the bare minimum, but it does satisfy the requirements of the SEC. Year 2, so this would be the end of your second year of service on your board. Governance 2, which is about finance and policy. By the end of your 3rd year, Governance 3, which is about student achievement and labor relations. Excuse me. And then Governance 4 needs to be taken in the 1st year of every subsequent term. So you could literally take Governance 4 half a dozen times, depending on how many times you get elected. This should have been earlier. Okay, SEC, advisory opinions. Advisory opinions can be requested by any school official or the school board attorney on their behalf. This is about proposed conduct, okay? What you're doing is asking the SEC, once you give them a set of specific facts about whether or not, if you took an action, it would be a violation of the code or the act. And that usually comes back pretty quickly, relatively speaking. When folks are filing ethics complaints, those can take quite a long time. We talked about the 6 members of the SEC needing 6 votes to make it public. So basically, there's a lot of advisory opinions you can look to. If you're going to request an advisory opinion, the SEC requests that you do homework and you check on their website to see if any prior advisory opinions have addressed the issue that you're talking about. And they do, if you haven't done that, they do make a point of that in their decision. And basically, you know, it's giving you safe parameters in which to work. So ethics opinions or ethics advisory are usually pretty valuable. And believe it or not, there are unique situations that come up all the time and haven't been addressed. And it's valuable to have a discussion with your board attorney if you can't do that, can't do the research on your own, and then let them give you an opinion about whether or not you can go get an advisory opinion about that. Here's a bunch of advisory opinions released in 2024. If you look at the, I don't know if I can do this. If you look at the citation here, the A means that it's an advisory opinion. The 24 means it's from 2024, and the 14 is just their numbering system. Questions that were posed by these. Can a board member review the resume of candidates before voting on the superintendent's recommendation? The SEC said, well, it's beyond our jurisdiction to say whether or not you can do that. If allowed, the role is limited to observation and assessment, CSA solely responsible for the selection. This actually references a couple earlier advisory opinions, which basically said that the SEC does not recommend that board members get involved in the hiring of any personnel aside from the superintendent, which only makes sense. Superintendent is 100% responsible for the personnel function in the district. The board acts on the recommendation of the superintendent when they bring personnel for approval. They did allow that there are instances in which the superintendent can allow 1 or 2 board members into the hiring process, or the interview process, I should say. And again, it's strictly for observation and assessment. The ability to make a recommendation is strictly the superintendent's. And again, board members don't get involved in that unless the superintendent invites them into it. Okay. A13-24, can a board member participate in negotiations if that board member has an aunt employed in the district who is not a member of a local union? Now, usually because board members do the negotiation basically with all the local unions, that would be a non-starter had that relative been in a union. There would be no question. The question here was because this person is not in the union. And the advice here was that because often those non-union employees use pieces of the negotiated settlement as their starting point for their own negotiations, that there was too much linkage there for a board member to be involved in those negotiations. So that board member was advised not to be a part of that. A11-24, a board member who works at a law firm representing employees that are suing the district vote on a candidate to fill a board vacancy since it could give a privilege to the law firm. In this case, if you read the case, basically the board member went pretty far in walling him or herself off from any of the details of that case. So there were a couple of questions involved in there. The first was, could they be involved in hiring a new board member, given that their firm is not hiring, appointing a new board member, given that their firm is the attorneys for the district. And basically they said that the board member exercised the restraint that they should around the lawsuit that was involved there, and that they would be expected to exercise similar restraint around any new board member that they interviewed was allowed to be part of the interview process. Can a board member whose adult child works in the district as a musical director, which is a stipend, and a substitute, participate in matters related to the superintendent? This is a fairly settled question when it came to the substitute aspect of it, which is that if they work for a third-party provider, they could be involved. But in this case, this person is also the musical director, and that person is on a stipend and reports up through the supervisory chain of command, so therefore would be unable to participate in negotiations, evaluation, or any personnel matters involving anybody in the chain of command with that particular person. A07-24, can two board members who co-own a business, an ice cream shop, participate in PTO, in fundraising events to support the PTO and clubs through hosting? And basically they were told no, they could not, because even if they weren't doing anything untoward relative to finances or deriving benefits, the public could interpret that they are. They also, part of the questions there were, could they hire children from the district to work in their shop because it was the only ice cream shop in town? And they said, yes, they could, but if there were issues that would affect any of those students coming before the board, they would have to recuse themselves there. A06-24, board member whose adult child alleges that the board council has a vendetta against their family, participate in matters related to the board council. In this case, no, because of the dynamics that were happening between that family and the board attorney. They were not allowed to participate in any matters related to board council. A05-24, by the way, all those citations are hyperlinked, so if you have the PowerPoint, you can go read those cases directly off of those. Board member received and used an endorsement from the local union in their campaign materials, participate in policy matters relevant to union members. The SEC looked at the level of union involvement and support provided to them, and it did not include a financial contribution, so it was not a per se conflict. In that case, the board member agreed not to be participating in the first year of his or her service, so that was something they did on their own. AO4-24, can a board member whose adult children are voting members of a nonprofit board that has ties to the school district participate in matters related to the nonprofit? No, they considered that just like a hire into the district, so no, they were not allowed to participate. AO4-24, can a board member who has a tenuous history with the superintendent, including being fired as an employee in a previous district, participate in matters related to the superintendent? And the SEC advised that due to the number of actions by the member, who also filed a civil suit, circulated a petition to fire the superintendent, and put up billboards to have the superintendent fired, participation in matters related to the superintendent would violate the public trust, damage the public trust. AO1-24, can a board member who's a college professor and has taught or administered several district staff and student teachers, including the superintendent, participate in matters related to current or former students? The advice there was no. Ethics complaints, we talked about advisory opinions. Ethics complaints, in contrast to advisory opinions, can be filed by anyone, can be filed by staff, can be filed by administrator, can be filed by a board member, and any member of the public. There's a 180-day window from the occurrence that is thought to be a violation to filing. If you pass that 180 days, it won't work. Again, the SEC is looking at what a reasonable person could interpret from the actions that are being considered. So that's the standard. Penalties. If you are found to have been guilty of violating a part of the code of the act, there's a progressive set of penalties that can be applied. The SEC recommends them to the commissioner imposes them, and can and will change the recommendation of the SEC at times. Starting with the least serious, there is a reprimand, which is basically a written rebuke by the commissioner. It doesn't result in a formal resolution. The next in seriousness is a censure, That is formal disapproval by the commissioner, publicized by the adoption of a resolution, which means your board will acknowledge by resolution that you have been censured by the SEC. Next two are pretty self-explanatory. Suspension, barred from any activity for a period of time, 30, 60, 180 days, depending on the seriousness of the violation. And lastly is a removal, which is immediate termination from board membership or employment if that person is an administrator. This is the code. I don't know if we want to go through this word for word. You've all got a copy of it, right? I will draw your attention to the standards. The standards are the language that the activity will be bumped up against to see if there has been a violation of that particular tenet. So that's exactly what the SEC is going to consider. Are you okay with me not reading all these, or do you want to go through them?
I'm okay with, yeah, we've had it in front of us as well, and have gone through it, so you don't have to read them.
I read them really fast. Okay. A lot of this stuff we've touched on already in the two presentations, so I don't want to needlessly go through them. Cases related to Code of Ethics from, they were just released, actually. C-45-23. A board member felt a staff member personally attacked him at board meetings, so he called her principal, identifying himself as a board member. In this case, the SEC said that the board member's action to silence the public or encourage them not to attend future board meetings by calling their employers to get them in trouble can compromise the integrity of the board. A censure was issued by the SEC there. C-24-22. A board member was involved in ongoing efforts to reverse an HIB and code of conduct violation in her own child's record. The board member reached out to the superintendent, the board, individual board members, and the board council to further her personal agenda. Because that action is unrelated to board duties, and the reversal is directive to administering the schools, meaning that that's not an area that board members should be involved in to start with. The board member in question was found guilty of violating. You can see down at the bottom of there, this little citation here. The C, D, and E are the specific pieces of the code that they found to have been violated. In this case, a reprimand was issued. C-89-21, a teacher was to be discussed in executive session. A board member sent a text message to the teacher where the board member stated that the board member could accuse the board president or secretary or CSA of malfeasance if they didn't get the Rice notice in time. The board member made a personal promise that he could take action if the teacher had not received the Rice notice. Can't make personal promises that might compromise the board. By sending such a message, the board member acted beyond the scope of his duty and compromised the board. Reprimand was recommended. C-78-23, a 15-plus year board member took inappropriate action that was beyond the role of the board member. The board member usurped the authority of the SUP, who is responsible for making disciplinary recommendations, took it upon themselves to go to the employee's home, pick up a letter, present it on behalf of the employee, directed the BA not to give a copy of the letter to the superintendent, and then, instead of recusing herself from the matter, advocated on behalf of the employee. Pretty serious stuff there. Recommended a suspension of 60 days for that board member. C-75-19, board member recorded an endorsement video for a slate of 3 school board candidates that referenced the board and the board member's position on it while wearing a school identification badge. So there's not a problem with a board member campaigning for folks to be on the board, but they can't do it from the perspective of, I'm a board member and I have this inside knowledge about these people that nobody else has, that's why you should listen to me, right? So there's another case later that we'll see that a board member simply posted a campaign picture of 3 candidates. with no comment whatsoever. Perfectly fine. Right? All right, recusal. This has been a question lately, and we built it into ethics because it's an important distinction. Abstaining from a vote is an implication that you don't have sufficient information to make a decision at the time the vote is taken. A recusal, on the other hand, is an acknowledgement that you are in a conflicted position based on some kind of relationship with either personnel in the district or a business relationship. And that not only should keep you from voting on it, but it should also keep you from taking part in any discussion on that matter. So recusals, abstentions are definitely different. Okay, prohibited acts. These are conflicts of interest. I won't go through the list, but basically, you need to recuse yourself if there's potentially a benefit to you or your immediate family due to some intersection of the district's interests and your interests, whether they be financial, a gift or favor, some kind of gain for a friend, position, etc. You need to recuse yourself from discussion or voting on that. Have questions about that, you need to consult your board attorney. Okay, so when we talk about a benefit, and that's kind of what sits at the core of what a conflict is all about, is a direct or indirect advantage, profit, privilege, or gain, whether personal, financial, or otherwise. So the determinative factor is a perception of the public, not the school officials' belief they are able to be objective. So you may very well be able to, in your mind, render an impartial decision about something, even though there may be some intersection of your interests and the board's. But if a member of the public can perceive that as you trying to gain some kind of advantage that would not be available to anyone else, that can be a problem. So again, board attorney is your best resource if you think that there is some kind of a conflict there. C12-23, acting superintendent's son was one of 160 individuals on a list of substitutes she recommended for board approval. Not recusing herself was said to constitute using her position to secure employment for her son. And due to the son's financial involvement, it might reasonably be expected to impair her objectivity. Basically, in this case, the acting superintendent did admit that having her son's name on that list of 160 people was an oversight on her part. And obviously, would not have done that had she known it, but was still issued a reprimand because she should have been aware of that. CO3-21, president of the Parent School Association, owns a spiritware company, donates merchandise to sell as a fundraiser, and was using the principal to promote the sale of to families. Basically, the SEC said that use of this private company to transact business and donate goods and services by the PTO, et cetera, could look as if someone was deriving a benefit from that, particularly the company, of course, and that he should not have been using the principal to help advance the interests of that business. And that was found to be in violation, and a reprimand recommended there. Board member voted on 2 resolutions to name a school building in honor of her supervisor with whom she had a political and professional relationship. So basically, they said that the nature of the relationship was far beyond just business, and that the board president should have recused herself from discussion of this. In addition, they actually changed policy in order to get that naming done. So recommended a censure there. Relationship definitions are important, especially when it comes to determining whether a conflict exists. There is an immediate family member, which is a spouse, civil union, domestic partner, or dependent child residing in the same household, so that's immediate family. Relative is quite a long list, and that is a number of permutations of relationship, whether related to the board member or the board member's spouse or partner by blood, marriage, or adoption. So it's quite a big list. And it says, although the term relative does not appear in prohibited acts or the code of ethics, a relative can create a conflict. Anyone not listed may be considered an other if a conflict exists. AO6-23, which is an advisory opinion, put out a chart that kind of went through each of those relationships and talked about whether they were a conflict, both on the negotiations front and also on the personnel issues front. Hiring and personnel. So blanket rule, you can't, as a board, hire the relative of a board member or the chief school administrator. However, you can be elected to the board where a relative already works in the district, or a superintendent can be hired as a superintendent of a district if they have a relative working there. And if those two cases happen, there's a couple of things they have to be mindful of. First is an administrator can't exercise direct or indirect authority over a relative who works in the district. So somebody else would have to do their evaluations, et cetera. Now, a board member who has a relative working in the district can't take part in any employment matters concerning the superintendent or anybody in the supervisory chain of command between that employee and the superintendent. So any personnel matters, they're out of. Any negotiations, hiring, even hiring a firm to search for a superintendent, they're out completely, can't be involved. Okay. That footnote at the bottom there, limited exceptions. Usually what happens that would classify as an exception there is that if you were trying to find a hard to locate teacher, for example, let's just say Latin, right? You want to hire a Latin teacher, and you are able to demonstrate to the executive county superintendent that you've done an exhaustive search and you really haven't found anybody to fill the bill except for Ed's nephew. Well, then you can go to the ECS with the resume and the proof that you had done the search, and they can give permission for you to make that hire. Collective bargaining. So this chart basically reads left to right, defining a relationship to a board member in column 1. Column 2, whether that person works in the district where you're a board member. Next is current member of a statewide public teachers union, yes or no. And then participate in negotiations, yes or no. Vote to ratify the contract, yes or no. So starting with row 1, an immediate family member or a relative who works in the district is in the union. Basically, it's a no. Can't participate in negotiations, can't vote to ratify the contract. Now you see that member of statewide teachers union says yes/no. That goes back to that instance we talked about before, where if they're not in a union, but somehow the terms of their employment are derived from the union's contract, that can be a problem. Row 2, immediate family member who doesn't work in the district but is in a statewide public teachers union, cannot participate in negotiations, but once all of the terms of the contract are settled, salary guides, total comp package, et cetera, they can be briefed on and vote on the contract. Okay? That's a change from 2017. And last row, a relative, right? That's that big list of people that we saw before. Works in the district? No. Member of a statewide public teachers union? No. Yes and yes. Can vote to ratify the contract and negotiate. So you see the first asterisk down there where it says absent another conflict. Typically, the other conflict is heightened union involvement, which means that if they would otherwise be eligible, but they are their local's president, they are a negotiating team for their local, or they're a building rep for their local, they would probably be conflicted out. Your board attorney should chime in on that. We talked about this a little bit before. So board members who receive union endorsements may be conflicted from collective bargaining if negotiations begin within the year of the election. But endorsement by the local doesn't create a per se future conflict unless financial contribution is given with the intent to influence. Somebody has to figure out intent in that, and that's not going to be me. Okay. Okay, yeah, so this is from last year. So the question was, can a board president who has a relative who works in the district be the person who they would typically be, according to the bylaws, to assign committee chairs and committee members? And also, could they act ex officio on those committees? Ex officio meaning the board president is a member of every single committee by bylaws. So basically, the advice here was that can't be involved in creating any committees, populating any committees, or acting ex officio on any committee in which that employee relative terms and conditions of employment would be discussed. Another Commissioner Decision 07-24. Board member's domestic partner is the transportation specialist in the district. The SEC said it would be prudent to serve on the transportation committee. Advice of counsel defense. So, believe it or not, if you go to your board attorney and your board attorney tells you to act in a certain manner around a aspect of your board service, and you do that, you are not completely shielded from culpability, okay? It's a legal opinion on their part, but the SEC could disagree. It's the best thing to do, and they're usually right, but sometimes it doesn't work, right? And one of the things that happened before was that if you took advice of counsel, you could still not only found to have violated, but you could also be assessed a penalty. And what they did very recently was they decided that there is some validity to acting on the advice of counsel that can shield you a little bit from harm, if you will, if you are found to have violated in some way. But there are conditions for the advice of counsel defense to be in play. The first is that the approval or the advice of the attorney was received prior to the action you took. The second is that the individual who offered the advice or approval relied upon possessed authority or responsibility. In other words, you didn't ask your cousin, you asked your attorney, right? All pertinent facts and circumstances were fully disclosed. If you didn't tell your attorney parts of what was involved in that situation, this doesn't work for you. You have to be fully compliant and open about it. And the last, that you actually complied with the advice that you received. So if all of those factors are present, the advice of counsel defense can be applied, but basically you could still found to have been violated. You wouldn't be assessed a penalty, and that would be the advantage of using advice of counsel defense. Volunteering, we talked about this a little bit before. Basically, it's dependent upon the level at which you're involved. So the frequency and level of interaction and or the authority. So basically, you can't be giving direction to students or staff. You can't be taking direction from staff in your volunteer capacity. And you can't be there so often that somebody who walked into the schools could mistake you for a staff member, right? You also can't be administering funds, right? You can't have control over any of the district finances in your voluntary activities. So basically, what they say is one-time, non-executive volunteer activity. So read on Dr. Seuss Day, fine. Be the advisor for the stamp club, no good. Help your wife who's building sets because she's the advisor of the drama group, still no good, right? Can't be involved there. Okay, any questions about volunteering? Awesome. What usually comes up is, can I still be on the PTA? Yes, you can. You can be on the board and the PTA. You can actually be the PTA president, right? But because you're a board member, because you're a state official, and you have ethical obligations, if you are on the PTA, and issues that would affect the PTA or might be perceived to affect the PTA come before the board, you are well advised to recuse yourself and refrain from voting on those. These are some of the examples that we talked about already. So one time or infrequent, so field trip chaperone, Read Across America, et cetera, that's all good. If you are going to volunteer in schools, do let the superintendent know you'll be in the school. Board members are recognized and they can change the tenor of a building when they're on site, so let them know that that's happening. And refrain from any related board discussion or vote. Like I said before, do your volunteer task, leave the building. Social media. There's a lot to unpack here. Basically, the question you want to ask, is there a nexus between the post that you may consider putting up and the role/membership on the board? So there's a couple of examples there. You see on the lower right-hand part, a board member discussed without a disclaimer a policy she moved to abolish, indicating it was reviewed by board council and opposed by 4 board members. I think that pertains directly to that person's board role, right? Not a good thing. This is the example I talked about before. A board member shared a campaign image of 3 candidates running for the board without any further comment. No nexus found, right? We talked about the disclaimer already. I'm not going to go over that. Basically, you don't have to use the exact wording. You have to hit all the salient points. It is not going to shield you if the content of what you're saying is contrary to the disclaimer. Yep. Couple of key things on this page. No longer appropriate to use your campaign page once you become an elected board member. It is thought to muddy, if you will, the voice you are speaking with. So you need to abandon your campaign page. They also do not recommend any social media account that inherently indicates your position as a board member. A couple other things, liking or sharing of a social media post from a personal social media account, personal, right, would not cause a reasonable member of the public to perceive you're speaking in your capacity as a board member. That was from a commissioner decision. And serving as administrator of a social media page isn't a per se violation, nor is the viewpoint of a post on its own. But the administrator maintains responsibility for the content, so it could potentially violate the act. Probably best served not to do that. Now for my next present, no, we're done. Any other questions? Well, thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. This is a long night for everybody, but I think it's important to get started on the right foot when you begin your board service. So, like I said, my contact information is on my website. You can reach out at any time, and best of luck in the year.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Lee. This was very informative. Oh, did you have something? All right. That was great. Thank you, Mr. Lee. This was really important, I think, for us to be able to just start on the right foot. And in front of you, you will see the statement of ethics. I would appreciate if we're all able to sign it. And
I do recommend you read it aloud because he didn't actually
Okay.
go through each of those, so we'll do what we've done in the past.
Okay.
What do you need?
I had it, I stole it.
You stole my pen, but I took it back because I
Okay.
like that pen.
Okay. All right, so I'll start, with the reading of our statement of ethics. As a member of the Glen Rock Board of Education, I state my intention to abide by the code of ethics for school board members as follows. I'll read A, and then we'll just proceed around until we complete it. I will uphold and enforce all laws, rules, and regulations of the State Board of Education and court orders pertaining to schools. Desired changes shall be brought about only through legal and ethical procedures.
I will make decisions in terms of educational welfare for the children and will seek to develop and maintain public schools that meet the individual needs of all the children regardless of their ability, race, creed, sex, or social standing.
I will confine my board action to policymaking, planning, and appraisal, and I will help to frame policies and plans only after the board has consulted those who will be affected by them.
I will carry out my responsibility not to administer the schools, but together with my fellow board members to see that they are well-run.
I will recognize that authority rests with the Board of Education and will make no personal promises nor take any private action that may compromise the board.
I will refuse, I will refuse to surrender my independent judgment to special interest or partisan political groups or to use the schools for personal gain or for the gain of friends.
I will hold confidential all matters pertaining to the schools which, if disclosed, would needlessly injure individuals or the schools. In all other matters, I will provide accurate information and, in concert with my fellow board members, interpret to the staff the aspirations of the community for its school.
I will vote to appoint the best qualified personnel available after consideration of recommendation by the chief school administrator.
I will support and protect school personnel and proper performance of their duties.
I will refer all complaints to the Chief Administrative Officer and will act on the complaints at public meetings only after failure of an administrative solution. Thank you. If we could just pass them to the center.
Dr. Robinson, we also need a motion and a vote.
Yes. Thank you. All right. I need a motion to approve R38. Ms. Stevenson, seconded by Ed. All right. And if we can call roll?
Ms. Calvez,
Yes.
Ms. Carasala,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mr. Corey,
Yes.
Mr. Hayward,
Yes.
Ms. Parlamas,
Yes.
Dr. Robinson,
Yes.
Ms. Rendell,
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Do you have anything for?
I will be very brief. First, I just want to say Happy New Year to everybody that is here and maybe still watching at some point. I hope everybody had a restful and joyous holiday season. And I want to congratulate Mr. Corey and Ms. Stevenson for re-election, and I want to welcome Mr. Cohen and congratulate him as well. Just one brief update for you all that next week we are beginning the next phase of the QSAC process. They will be doing site visits to tour buildings and the actual like physical inspection type of piece. And then in February is when we have the on-site visit for the rest of it. So we're getting very close to that. And we are I think we are prepared for that. So all of those things are in place. And that concludes my report. It's a long night. I'm going to be brief.
Thank you. May I have a motion to discuss G1 through G5? All right, Ms. Parlamas, seconded by Mr. Hayward. All right. Any questions or comments regarding our G items?
I do. Oh, you go.
Okay, Mr. Parlamas. Oh.
I'll go. I'm just going to let you know in advance that I'm going to be voting no on G1 for the calendar, and I just want to give my reason to the board. Just going through a year of having the full November week off, anyone who has a high school athlete can't go out that week, and those extra 2 days pushes the end of the school year out into another week. It also negatively impacts students getting jobs, going to camps, anyone going to any college programs. I didn't think it was necessary to have that full week off in November, and there's a lot of days off in the fall, I think 17 and a half versus 10 and a half in the spring. So that was my reason. I just wanted to let the board know why.
And just a point of clarification for Robert's rules. So I'll just need a second person to just actually put in the motion, because if you move it, you can't technically vote no on it. Does that make sense?
Oh, then I will remove my motion to.
Okay, okay. So, all right, Ms. Stevenson, and then seconded by Mr. Hayward. And then your comments are noted. Mr. Cohen?
So with regard to G2, the calendar for 2006, 2007, I know the board talked about it in length in the past, but I wasn't part of it, so just wanted to give my 2 cents. One, about the start date of the 2006, 2007 calendar. I know traditionally in New Jersey or in this district, we start after Labor Day, but once every 7, 8 years, Labor Day falls in the second week of September. That means that we extend the summer break. That means that is additional hardship on parents that have to find support for their kids. It's extended summer break. I think it's not helpful for the kids. So that's my concern with that. I think that we should start in the first week of September, which is September 1st on that year. And the second point is actually about the November break. This year we gave a full year of November break. In G1 we're approving a full year of November break, but then we're going back to only 3 days. So without enough community vote or community input or analyzing the impact and the results of the move to a full week, I think we should stay with a full week, or at least spend some time analyzing the impact of the change to 1 full week. So I'm going to vote no on G2.
Okay, thank you. Your comments are noted. I also want to just mention that one of the aspects of the November break that we've, pretty consistently discussed is about the voting in the schools. And that's kind of something that is still actively being worked on, because I think that the dynamic of this conversation will change pretty heavily if we're able to work with our town and our borough to get that aspect taken care of. But noted. Mr. Corey.
And a comment on G2. This is a draft calendar. I do fully expect that we're going to continue to review the issues that drive the calendar. This is not the finalized.
Yeah.
Though we are ahead of some other districts in putting a planner out there. So I know my 2025 is already locked in, so having a calendar beyond that is helpful as I'm looking for other things. I know the community appreciates that too. And as you said, we've been talking about elections in schools and other issues that drive these calendars. If we don't talk about it now and have it on paper, we can't manipulate, we can't adjust on it. So I'm in support of doing what we're doing for that purpose of discussing and finding these issues and making the broader improvements that make our calendar better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments regarding our G1 through G5? All right. Seeing no other comments, Mr. Canellis, if we're able to call roll.
Ms. Calves,
Yes.
Ms. Carasola,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
So yes, except from G2, which is a no.
Mr. Corey,
Yes.
Mr. Hayward,
Yes.
Ms. Parlanis,
I'm a yes, except for G1. I'm a no.
G1.
G1.
Thank you. Dr. Robinson,
Yes.
Ms. Rundell,
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. I also wanted to mention that G5, I just wanted to say thank you for the Youth Basketball League for those donations for the basketball warm-ups for the boys and girls team. That was really generous. Can I have a motion to discuss P1 through P4? Mr. Hayward, that's your time. Seconded by Ms. Calves. Any questions or comments with regards to P1 through P4? All right. Seeing everything satisfied, if we're able to please call roll.
Ms. Calves,
Yes.
Ms. Carasola,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mr. Corey,
Yes.
Mr. Hayward,
Yes.
Ms. Parlamas,
Yes.
Dr. Robinson,
Yes.
Ms. Rundell,
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes, except for P4 as it pertains to me. My name is in the P4. Thank you.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. It is 9:26, and it is for our public comments, it's time for our public comments section. Please state your name and your address, and seeing as no members of the public remain, we will close at 9:27. All right, on to some old business. Just a couple items. I know, many of you have either discussed with me individually or sent me emails or text messages regarding some ideas for ad hoc committees. So I just want to recircle back to our goal statements, just kind of give us a fresh overview of the things that we're working on. So our Board of Education goals for 24-25. The Glen Rock Board of Education aims to achieve NJSBA board certification by June 2026, which is next year, completing half of the required training credits during the 24-25 school year. This commitment underscores our dedication to effective governance and continuous improvement. So that one I am actively working on. We did just take 2 trainings today. We have some other things, like I've worked with Mr. Lee on making sure that we're proceeding through and taking all the benefit of the trainings that we have. Individually, as board members, you can also become individually certified. I know Ms. Rundell just, received her board certification. I think many others of us are actually on our way to becoming certified board members just by some of those trainings that you get. You'll get into your email from the NJSBA. Just, I think I logged on to one that was just about onboarding new board members and learning about different kinds of governance structures and different things that are going on all around the state. You can log on sometimes and just, have a listen and have access to these presentations, and you get credits in addition to going to a certain number of county meetings, as well as going to the delegate meeting, which a few of us were able to attend virtually and 2 people in person. Ms. Stevenson as our delegate, and then as well as Ms. Rundell were present, which was phenomenal because we actually learned a lot more about what that role is as a delegate. It turns out, and I'll ask you both to just weigh in there, it turns out that, so the delegate meeting occurs every year, and all of us can attend. Some boards attend, twice a year. Thank you. So it occurs twice a year, and all board members can attend, or you can all send your delegate to attend, and you discuss, well, actually, maybe you're better able to say it, either one of you, yeah.
So it was in December. In person, we were down at Mercer County College. And it was very interesting because people from all over the state are there. So it was nice to meet other people, listen to other, what's going on in other districts. So each district can bring up different resolutions before the New Jersey School Board, the Delegate Assembly. Doesn't mean that's what's going to happen, but it gives guidance for the New Jersey School Boards on what they're going to advocate for. And just a couple that I found to be interesting, or I know we had this discussion, was the Star Ledger is no longer going to be printing paper. So there was questions from some of those communities that live in that distribution area of their paper of record, because they don't have a hard copy of a paper of record. So I know there's something now, I think it's in the legislature now, that online you'll be able to advertise just online, not necessarily in a physical paper. Like we put ours in the record, and I know tonight we voted on our papers of record. So that was an interesting discussion, as unfortunately, as somebody whose husband's in the newspaper business, you don't want the print paper to go away, but, it kind of is the way that it's going, so it's good to have this and changing. And the other one I found very interesting was, and I forget the town where it was, but there was a senior who was entering the military. and he had to miss a lot of school because he was doing various activities for this military, different trainings. And it got to the point where he wasn't having enough, they weren't excused absences in that district. They were not unexcused. So it ended up to be an issue with his graduation, which they were able to rectify. So actually, I did go back into our policy, and I believe we do cover military things that you absentees, or like just because if you're going to college visit, that's an excused absence. If somebody's choosing not to go to college and they're doing military, that should also be the excused absence. So that was one of the other resolutions that we had voted on, and we passed.
And, oh, I was going to say just that some of these things actually will come to our knowledge beforehand so that it could help prepare, you know, Ms. Stevenson, especially in her role this year, to be able to vote on our behalf. So if you're able to kind of like follow along with it and then present those items for us for discussion, and then, you know, it'll help better inform you when you are voting on our behalf for these items.
Right, the next one is in May, at the end of May, I think it was. So I don't know how far in advance they give.
It wasn't far enough. I think that was one of the things that they talked about. It was like
Right,
a month?
to get the resolutions.
Not even the resolutions, but even just the date of the meeting.
Oh, okay.
You had to go for a while. Okay.
Just, and also, this is more, well, that was for a board goal. I attended the county meeting for Bergen County in December. Do you want me to talk about that in new business? When we
Yeah,
get to
talking about new business. Okay. So that takes, you know, like, that's just an update on the progress for goal number 1. Goal number 2, the Glen Rock Board of Education will complete an NJSBA policy wellness check during the 24-25 school year to ensure our policy manual is current. Additionally, we will review policies in the 2000 and 5000 series focusing on student achievement. So I think this one is best carried out through our CAL meetings, and Mr. Hayward, are you able to help us break this down through the rest of the year into like manageable bites for the policies, since, you know, this is something that we'll discuss as a board during our CAL meetings, like kind of, you know, that falls within our, you know, okay.
I would
Yeah.
be happy to help.
I appreciate that. And that will carry us through to the end of the year, as well as doing this policy wellness check, which is also a thing that's required for board certification. That is an item that we will complete during this process. The third thing is the Glen Rock Board of Education aims to review and refine the CSA evaluation tool to support district goals, foster reflective and evidence-based assessments, and streamline the evaluation process for clarity and effectiveness. Towards the end of last year, I did ask Ms. Stevenson if you'd be able to chair that. And again, the purpose of like an ad hoc committee or a subcommittee just for this goal is just to like evaluate what options we have for tools, get a better understanding of the process so that then you could bring it to the CAL meeting for us to like, for you to be our subject matter experts on this, so that we can determine if it's something that we need to adopt, or is there a different framework for the CSA tool that we currently use that we, you know, can adapt to better serve our needs. All right. Moving along. Another ad hoc committee that we'll do this year is a community engagement or community, what is the word I'm looking for? Relations, yes, community relations. Not that outreach is not good, but I was looking for a community relations committee. I am thinking, especially after hearing Mr. Lee talk about other ways, like perhaps whoever is, I was actually going to ask you, Stephanie, if you'd share it. Okay, I know we've had discussions. So in a community relations manner, I think that if we talked about maybe some of the other activities that were going on, like official activities for the schools and for the districts, where we could you know, work with our CSA and acting CSA to have just a board presence, like you're just there. You know, maybe 2 of us show up and are just there to show, you know, support for the schools, support for the kids, support for the activities, and just interact with our community. And I feel like that would be a good way for us to do it without like necessarily saying like, oh, you know, meet me here to discuss your complaints. It's more like organic, like you're part of the processes that go on, and we are, that's, like, I just felt like that's a good way for us to integrate better with the community in our roles. And then, you know, get innovative. I know, Ms. Parlamas, you sent an email with some really good ideas. And, you know, for the ones that are within our, like, ability to carry out, just, like, evaluate and see how these things could potentially get done, and if they're, you know, worthwhile endeavors for the board to take on. And then I think that we will have a budget committee. And again, so a budget ad hoc committee, like, again, these are all ad hoc committees. We are not changing our governance structure. That is not what is being discussed here. We are still working in committee of the whole, and a lot of these things are ways for us to break down some information, like whereas you have like a community and community engagement or community relations or even the CSA eval or like an ad hoc negotiations committee and things like that. Those have a bit of different purpose. I know that historically with budget, what we've done is somewhere around the budget planning time, which occurs like, I mean, well, budget is going on all year, but typically between like January through April or February through April, we have had different meetings with our BA and CSA where they talk about and break down the budget in ways that people that are not accountants are able to better understand. And so that would be the goal here with this budget committee for people, you know, that are on it, for them to get a better understanding of our current budget that helps to speak more when we do the official budget meetings within our CAL. So it's not to drive, you know, like budget initiatives. That's something that we talk about within our purview at our CAL meetings and out, like amongst all of us. It's not to find out, you know, different ways to change that. It's just really like a focus group to be able to understand a bit more about something that many of us may not understand at that level. And that is it. Any questions on those proposals? I think, I mean, we have, you know, 6 months in the year, and I think this is, you know, still pretty lofty. But what I'm hearing from each of you is that this is the type of work that you want to do. So if it's not in alignment, you know, now's the time. Let me know what you think. Stephanie?
Yeah, no, thank you for raising it. Thank you for giving it such thoughtful consideration. I know we had talked about it loosely at our last meeting, so I did have some notes, and I was coming up with the community relations as well, so thank you for thinking of me for that, and I'd love to be active on that. For the finance, I had finance also. It sounds like that would be covered with the budget one. The only thing I would just raise for our consideration, I like what you said about kind of making it just easy to kind of navigate, I guess, right? But I think another value point could be just the long-term kind of vision and planning, just to keep that. I feel like that was brought up too last year when we were talking about the budget, just to kind of have that committee stay on top of maybe some, the vision and have it.
I think
have like
for,
2
I would,
tiers.
I'll have to discuss that part offline first with both, like, because I want to make sure that we, like, I have to figure out, one, like, what's the board's role and our, like, on the yearly planning, and I just want to, before I, like, agree to or say, like, yes, then I just want to check. Like, I'll check and then get back to you on, like, what that piece would look like within this committee, the ad hoc committee, as well as, like, I want to make sure that since it's an ad hoc committee and this isn't a standing committee, that it's not like we're putting something within like a standing role, you know, outside of what we should already be doing. So if that's something that we, you know, just want to have insight into, it might not even be something that falls within that. We could just find a way to discuss that within our cows and things like that. Does that make sense?
It does. It
Okay.
just seems like some of the vision stuff seems like it needs some, I don't know, pulling of information. So, but yes, that makes what you said
Yeah, no,
makes
I'll
sense.
definitely get back to you on that. And if that's something that we could like just do that way, then it would just be part of our regular operations. Yes, Ms. Rendell.
Just about that. So one, I think the whole board should be part of the vision and the planning. That's like our main goal, and I think it should be all of us. Second, that's what our board retreat is for. It can be more developed and it can be much more big if that's what people want, but that's what that's for. That's that goal. That's where we vision and we plan and we think all year about it, and that's where we come up with it, and we all have our say. So that, I feel like if we go to an ad hoc, it would create division.
Okay.
That's my feel.
Thank you for your input. I think, I think my concern would be that a little bit of that, like I want to make sure that we're all actually involved and in tune with that kind of thing. So hold me accountable on getting back to you about how we can find, like implement that, or it's already implemented, but I mean like how we can highlight it to make it packaged well. Mr. Cohen.
Just an operational question. How does what's the operational process of those ad hoc committees? Like, is it standard meetings, and who's in each committee?
So I will put out committee assignments. Like, so typically the president puts out committee assignments within the first 1 or 2 meetings. I would like to do that within the first meeting. And the operations, some of this is new. So I think that the leaders of each committee will contact the members of the committee, and then you guys will figure out how you want to meet and like figure that out individually. I won't dictate that. And then, like for the committee assignments, like just because you're not on like a committee doesn't mean that you aren't going to be able to have input on that thing. Does that make, does that make sense? Like everyone is going to be able to have input and shared understanding and shared responsibility and all of those things. So, please know that, the work is still going to be done and everyone is still going to be able to have impact and do that. I just think that this is a way for us to be more effective and to keep the conversations going. All right? Does that answer your question? Okay. Anything else? All right. Hold on. Let me just pull this up. Oh, okay. So new business. You said you had.
So I attended the Bergen County School Board's meeting on December 5th. I did virtually. And Lisa Swain was one of the panelists. There was different legislatures from Bergen County area, and they were talking about the teacher shortage. So some things that they're looking to do is to remove the residency requirement. In order to be a teacher in New Jersey, you must reside in New Jersey. They're looking to eliminate that, which might be, especially even around here, we're close to New York, or people who are close to Pennsylvania. Retired teachers can go back into teaching, and that waiver ends at the end of the school year. Looking at a universal special ed certification instead of by subject. Then there's also a bill for a general science certification as opposed to having certification in physics and chemistry. They think that will alleviate the issue of trying to find teachers. And that is really all they said, a lot going on.
Thank you. Thank you for attending, and everyone, you're able to attend these meetings both in person or virtually. So sometimes go ahead and sign up, and
If you go in person, you get dinner.
you do get dinner.
6:45. This one in January it's only virtual, and it's hot topics in education. But again, especially when it's in person, it's just nice because you can, excuse me, you can meet people from other towns, and it's just a good way to network and just meet other people and listen to what's going on and, bounce ideas off of each other.
All right. That is it. All right. So barring no other comments, we are going to recess to closed session, and then, we're going to be, yeah, no action will be taken. No voting action will be taken at our closed session, and then we'll come back into open session and close it for the evening. All right. I need a motion to recess to closed. All right, Liz, seconded by Stephanie. All right.
Keith, I need like 10 minutes, maybe 12?
Can we just have a vote?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Opposed.
We're in closed.
All right, we're in closed.
Yeah, we're not coming back, so.